We are going to write a lot of code today, so I want to cover some of the kind of theoretical and philosophical parts first. Cloud Firestore is based on this idea of collections, and this is very different. The previous version of this course focuses entirely on the real-time database, and a lot of that is still relevant, and that's why we're kind of focusing on Cloud Firestore today. That content is still works. With Cloud Firestore, you have this idea of a top-level collection. In this case, there's users, and users have many workouts, and those workouts have histories in this diagram from Firebase. In the real-time database, it was one giant JSON tree, and you had to be really careful. Because let's say you wanted to make a chat room, and you're like, cool, I'll have rooms, and those rooms will have messages, and those messages will have users, and so on and so forth. If you got any part of that tree, you would get every sub-node. Right? So you had to be really careful about keeping the tree incredibly shallow. So you can have just the chat rooms that had maybe the IDs of the messages and keep the messages somewhere else. So you can get as little of the tree as you needed. With Cloud Firestore, actually, you can get it searches shallowly. So if you get the users, you're just going to get this top level. And for a given user, you can go get the next collection down. Right? So a lot of the really careful data management that we had to do with the real-time database is not as much of a thing anymore in Cloud Firestore. There are kind of some new challenges there, which is going across all of the sub-collections is a little more difficult. So if you're getting to do really complicated NoSQL queries, you are still going to have to do some data normalization as well. But that is now for specific kind of searching cases. Generally speaking, you can structure your data based on your UI, and as you need to pull stuff, right, you can then kind of rearrange stuff. And it's really interesting to think about stuff. When we think about SQL databases, we have previously been kind of at the mercy of the database schema. Normalize all the data, don't have it duplicated anywhere, so on and so forth. And this, a lot of times when we're working with a NoSQL database, is a big change. Right? For the most part, is thinking about our user interface and thinking about what we want to show to the user and structuring our data based on that. And it's one of the things that becomes really kind of difficult to wrap your mind around sometimes is it is okay to store the same data multiple places. You might be like, how do I keep that all in sync? When we get to Cloud Functions, there's a way to say, OK, if I change it in this one canonical source, let me show you all the places to go ahead and update it there as well. And there's ways to go about that. But basically, thinking about your user interface first and modeling your data based on that, rather than the bowing to the lord that is your schema and trying to then sit there and write complicated join statements and coercing it back into something that works for your user interface. So that's really great and a fun way to think about things that I enjoy. So like I said before, in the real-time database, you had to be very careful because you would get all the subnodes of a tree. That is not true in Cloud Firestore. You'll get a shallow query. So if you just search for all of the users, you're going to get those users before you get those sub-collections. And you kind of dive down for each one as you need it. So you still need to be mindful, especially if you're doing some complicated searches, but you can be less paranoid that you're going to send way too much data to your user. And either because theoretically we are developing devices that could run on mobile or lower power devices. Many of us who are writing code have fancy $3,000 laptops, but generally speaking, not all of our users do. So we can get it, we don't have to worry about it as much with Cloud Firestore, which I think is a really nice thing.